There is a kind of silence that doesn't arrive with the night, nor with the absence of people. It is not born out of empty rooms or lonely streets. No, this silence is far more personal. It waits inside of you. It has been waiting for years. And when it finally arrives, when the noise fades, when the screens dim, and the voices retreat, you are left face to face with the one person you've managed to avoid the most yourself. You say you fear loneliness, that you fear being alone. But the truth is more delicate. What you really fear is the encounter, the quiet moment when all distractions dissolve and you're left with nothing but your own reflection, not the one you see in mirrors, but the one that lives behind your eyes in the hidden corridors of your soul. I felt that silence too. I remember nights where my room was filled with shadows, but the loudest presence was not the darkness outside. It was the rising echo of my own thoughts. Questions I had long buried came knocking. Regrets I had locked away began to stir. Memories I once escaped began to surface. And for the first time, I realized I wasn't afraid of the world abandoning me. I was afraid of what I might see if I stopped running. Because when you stop running, you meet the gap, that unbearable distance between who you pretend to be and who you truly are. And in that space lives a kind of ache that words rarely touch. An ache that says you've been away from yourself for far too long. We live in a world that teaches us to fill the silence with noise, with movement, with people, with endless scrolling, anything but stillness. Because stillness demands we pay attention. And paying attention means we might discover how much we've lost touch with ourselves. But the silence is patient. It doesn't chase you. It simply waits. It waits until you're too tired to keep running, until the distractions lose their flavor, until the noise can no longer drown out the quiet voice calling you back home. This is not the kind of fear you can outrun forever. Eventually, the moment comes. The moment when you sit in a quiet room, the phone turned off, no one left to text, no tasks left to check off, and there you are, breathing, listening, feeling. And what rises inside isn't the emptiness of being unloved. It's the emptiness of being unknown by your own self. We are surrounded by people. We are surrounded by conversations, by constant updates, by notifications that blink like city lights in the night. And yet, beneath all this noise, many of us carry a silent hunger, a kind of emptiness that no amount of interaction seems to satisfy. It isn't the absence of others that drains us. It's the absence of ourselves. From the moment we step into the world, we are taught how to adapt. We learn how to please, how to belong, how to present the most acceptable version of who we are. We wear smiles when we ache. We nod when we want to scream. We say yes when everything inside whispers no. And slowly, almost without noticing, we drift further and further from our center. This distance grows quietly. It hides behind achievements, behind crowded calendars, behind successful careers and seemingly happy relationships. But late at night, when the crowd disperses, when the applause fades, we feel it, that heavy silence. That strange sense that despite everything we've built, something vital is missing. And so we fill it. We fill it with more noise, more tasks, more distractions. We cling to relationships, not out of love, but out of fear. Fear of sitting alone with our own company. Fear of what we might discover if we stop moving. But what are we really afraid of? We fear seeing the truth of our disconnection. We fear facing the parts of ourselves we've neglected for years, the forgotten dreams, the suppressed desires, the unhealed wounds, the small voice inside that whispers, "I miss you. I miss who you were before you became so busy surviving." Kierkegaard called this inner fracture the despair of self-abandonment, a state where we no longer recognize who we've become because we have invested so much into being what others wanted us to be. It's a silent suffering carried beneath polished smiles and impressive resumes. And this is why solitude terrifies us. Not because we need others to survive, but because without them, we are forced to confront the emptiness we've been hiding. But that confrontation is not a punishment. It's an invitation. An invitation to return, to stop running, to meet ourselves again gently, honestly, bravely. Because in truth, we were never meant to be strangers to our own souls. There comes a moment when the masks grow too heavy, when the faces we wear for the world begin to crack under the weight of pretending. For so long, we've become experts at wearing them. The smiling mask, the strong mask, the capable mask. Each one crafted carefully to protect us from judgment, from rejection, from the terrifying risk of being fully seen. But what happens when the audience leaves? When there is no one left to applaud or to impress? The stage lights dim, the curtain falls, and there, in the quiet after the performance, stands the version of you that you've hidden behind layers of expectations. It is unsettling, because you realize that you have spent years perfecting an image rather than nurturing your soul. You've been performing for so long that you can no longer tell where the mask ends and where you begin. And when you finally sit alone, stripped of roles, stripped of applause, you meet the raw, unfiltered version of yourself. Fragile, unfinished, but painfully real. This is where the deepest discomfort of solitude lives. Not in the absence of company, but in the presence of truth. You see, every time we betray our authentic desires to fit into someone else's narrative, a small fracture forms inside. A fracture that grows each time we abandon our voice to maintain peace, each time we suppress our needs to earn acceptance. Eventually, those fractures become chasms, and we wake up lost in a version of life that no longer feels like our own. I remember sitting alone one evening after a long season of chasing approval. The house was silent, but inside me, the noise was deafening. Questions I couldn't escape circled my mind. Who am I without their praise? Who am I without this role I've played? Have I built a life I even recognize? That evening didn't offer easy answers. But for the first time, I allowed the questions to echo without rushing to silence them. I sat in the ache. I breathed through the discomfort. And slowly, I began to see this despair wasn't my enemy. It was my invitation. Because despair is not always destruction. Sometimes it is the alarm that finally wakes us from a life of self-abandonment. And when you can sit in that honest discomfort, when you resist the urge to numb it with quick distractions, you open the door to something sacred, the chance to finally return to yourself. There is a delicate shift that happens when you stop seeing solitude as punishment and begin to recognize it as sanctuary. Loneliness is absence, but solitude, true solitude, is presence. The kind of presence that does not depend on anyone else. The kind that rises quietly from within, like a gentle light, illuminating the corners of your soul that were once hidden in shadow. Most people never reach this place because they spend their entire lives trying to escape it. The moment silence enters the room, they reach for noise, for company, for distraction. anything but stillness. Because stillness makes you feel everything you've tried to avoid. But if you stay, if you sit still long enough to feel the ache rather than flee from it, something extraordinary begins to unfold. At first, it is deeply uncomfortable. Your mind will scream. Your chest will tighten. Old memories will surface like ghosts long forgotten. You will feel the urge to run to busy yourself again, to call someone to scroll through endless distractions. But if you resist that urge, if you simply breathe and remain, you will begin to witness something few ever experience, the soft arrival of peace. Not because the pain has vanished, but because you are no longer a fugitive from your own heart. I remember when I first learned to sit with myself. I would light a small candle each night, sit in complete silence, and just listen, not to the outside world, but to the quiet tremble inside me. The longer I sat, the more I heard my true self, the one I had buried beneath obligations and expectations. There were tears some nights, and fears, and regrets that burned. But underneath it all, there was also a voice I hadn't heard in years, a voice that whispered, "I'm still here." Arthur Schopenhauer once said that solitude is not weakness, but a mark of strength, not because you don't need others, but because you have learned to sustain yourself from within. You no longer depend on applause or validation to feel alive. You carry your own center, your own light. Solitude becomes your quiet rebellion against the emptiness of noise. It becomes your homecoming, not because the world has changed, but because you have chosen to stop abandoning yourself. This is the quiet power of solitude. It teaches you to belong to yourself first. Modern life has mastered the art of escape. Everywhere you turn, there's another distraction, another demand for your attention, another invitation to run from yourself. You scroll, you swipe, you fill your hours with noise as if silence itself is a predator waiting to pounce. But the true predator is not silence. The true danger lies in how easily we allow ourselves to vanish beneath the weight of these distractions. We convince ourselves that constant activity means we're alive, that if we stay busy enough, we'll never have to face the quiet question, breathing beneath all the noise. Who am I really? This is why so many people feel exhausted without knowing why. It's not the work. It's not even the busyness. It's the endless running, the constant effort to stay ahead of the ache that rises when life slows down. And yet, no matter how fast you run, the ache follows. You can fill your calendar with meetings. You can scroll through endless feeds of other people's lives. You can drown in productivity and still feel strangely hollow at the end of the day. Because you've spent another day escaping instead of arriving. I've lived those days. Days where I mistook momentum for meaning. Days where my success became my disguise. I was always surrounded by people, yet I felt completely disconnected. It wasn't that I lacked company. I lacked myself. It's terrifying to admit, isn't it? That you can be in a crowded room, loved by many, admired by some, and yet feel utterly alone, because no one around you truly knows the parts of you that you've hidden, not even you. Schopenhauer warned of this, that the more we seek stimulation, the more shallow our lives become. We become addicted to the next notification, the next purchase, the next temporary thrill. And each layer of distraction pulls us further from the stillness where our truth waits. Modern life encourages us to live externally, to measure worth by what others see, to believe that more means better. But in doing so, we trade depth for performance. We build beautiful exteriors while our inner rooms remain empty and untouched. The hardest truth to face is this: many of us have been running from ourselves for so long we've forgotten how to come home. But that home is still there, beneath the noise, beneath the exhaustion, waiting patiently for the moment you grow too tired to keep fleeing. There comes a quiet rebellion, not loud, not dramatic, but powerful beyond words. It begins the moment you decide to stop running, the moment you sit still and say, "I will face whatever rises." At first, it feels like standing at the edge of an ocean at night. Vast, unfamiliar, frightening. You can feel the waves of old pain, regrets, and fears crashing against you. And every instinct begs you to turn back, to reach for something that will numb the rising discomfort. But this time you stay. And when you stay, something sacred begins to unfold. You begin to hear the voices you've silenced for years. The voice of the child you once were, who longed to be accepted for simply existing. The voice of forgotten dreams you buried to meet expectations. The voice of wounds you carried in secret, hoping time would erase them. They rise one by one, not to shame you, not to punish you, but simply to be heard, because they have waited patiently for you to finally sit long enough to listen. I remember nights where I trembled beneath the weight of these voices. My mind flooded with memories I tried to forget. Faces I hadn't seen in years appeared again. Words I regretted saying echoed loudly. And yet, beneath the waves of emotion, there was something else, something unexpected. There was relief. Not because the pain was gone, but because I was no longer hiding from it. I was finally present. I was finally honest. And in that honesty, a small flicker of peace appeared, fragile at first, but unmistakably real. This is where healing begins. Not in avoiding your shadows, but in sitting beside them. Not in forcing answers, but in allowing questions to exist without needing immediate solutions. You learn to breathe through the ache instead of suffocating beneath it. Kierkegaard described this as the responsibility of freedom, the courage to carry both the weight and the wonder of being fully yourself, to hold your pain and your beauty in the same hands without flinching. The world rarely teaches us this. It teaches us to fix, to solve, to escape. But true healing is found in presence, in allowing space for what is broken without demanding it be perfect before you love it. And slowly, the room inside you, once filled with noise and fear, begins to feel like home. Something beautiful happens when you walk far enough into yourself, when you sit with your fears long enough, when you breathe through your regrets instead of fleeing them. The chaos begins to soften. Not because life has become perfect, not because all wounds have healed, but because you've stopped fighting yourself. And in that stillness, you begin to taste a kind of freedom you never knew was possible. You no longer need to chase constant validation. You no longer seek applause like oxygen. The love you offer to others is no longer born from hunger, but from abundance. You give not to fill your emptiness, but because you are already full. This is the gift of true solitude. It does not close you off from others. It allows you to love them more deeply because you are no longer clinging to them out of fear. You do not need them to complete you. You simply share your presence freely and fully without desperation. I remember the first time I truly felt this shift. Sitting alone on a quiet morning, the world still asleep. The old ache I once feared had softened, and for the first time I felt whole, not because someone loved me, not because I had accomplished something grand, but simply because I was finally present with myself. Schopenhauer called this inner self-sufficiency the mark of strength, not arrogance, not coldness, but quiet power. The ability to draw life from within, to carry peace that cannot be shaken by external storms. In this space, your relationships transform. You no longer accept crumbs disguised as affection. You no longer tolerate shallow connections that drain your soul. You are no longer desperate for others to fill what you have learned to hold for yourself. And ironically, it's from this place of inner fullness that your connections with others grow deeper. Because you are not loving out of need. You are loving out of overflow. You are not attaching out of fear. You are offering presence from a place of freedom. Solitude becomes your sanctuary, a space where you can return whenever life grows loud, a quiet room within yourself that no one can invade, where you are safe, seen, and whole. This is not a destination reached in haste. It is built slowly, gently, one honest moment at a time. But once found, it remains like a light that never burns out, no matter how dark the world outside may become. Even as you begin to taste the quiet strength of solitude, the world does not stop pulling at you. It whispers seductions in every corner, more distractions, more noise, more ways to avoid yourself once again. The temptation to flee never fully disappears. It comes dressed in productivity, in endless scrolling, in relationships that promise comfort but demand your self-abandonment in return. It offers you 1,000 ways to be busy, to be entertained, to be surrounded without ever truly being present. And so easily, almost without noticing, you can slip back into the old patterns. You fill your calendar again. You chase new goals. You numb discomfort with temporary pleasures. And slowly, quietly, you drift away from yourself once more. The flight from self is subtle. It wears the mask of success, of connection, of accomplishment. But beneath it all lives a hollow echo, the same ache that once called you into solitude in the first place. I have fallen into this pattern many times. Times when I thought I had healed only to realize I was escaping again, this time dressed in new costumes. But every escape eventually leads back to the same quiet realization: nothing outside of me can replace what is missing inside. Kierkegaard called this condition silent despair. A life that looks full on the surface, but is quietly starving beneath. We pretend, we smile, we achieve. But inside, there is a knowing that somewhere along the way, we've lost ourselves again. The danger is not that the world offers distractions. The danger is how easily we accept them, how quickly we trade our inner peace for momentary relief, how often we choose comfort over growth, distraction over presence, applause over authenticity. But the cost is high. Each time we flee ourselves, we weaken the foundation we once started to build. Our relationships grow shallow. Our ambitions lose meaning. Our days become movements without soul, actions without depth. It's like living inside a house beautifully decorated on the outside, but empty and cold within. And yet, even in the midst of this flight, there remains hope. The door back to yourself is always open. The invitation is always waiting in the quiet, in the discomfort, in the breath you take when you finally stop running. The hardest part is not finding your way back. The hardest part is choosing to stop fleeing. There comes a moment when you finally decide enough. Enough of the fleeing. Enough of the pretending. Enough of building a life that sparkles on the surface but leaves you empty inside. This moment is not dramatic. It is quiet, almost gentle. Like a breath you didn't realize you were holding, finally released. You sit with yourself, not as a judge, not as a critic, but as a companion. You begin to ask different questions, not how to become what others expect, but how to become who you truly are. Not how to fill the silence, but how to inhabit it. Not how to escape discomfort, but how to hold it with tenderness. And slowly, you build a new kind of relationship. A relationship with yourself. One built not on performance, but on presence. Not on conditions, but on acceptance. You learn to forgive the versions of you who did not know better. You learn to honor the parts of you that were once silenced. You learn to sit with your own company and feel not emptiness, but peace. This is where true freedom begins. Because when you no longer need others to validate your existence, you no longer compromise your soul to earn their approval. You no longer accept crumbs from the world because you've learned to feed yourself from within. You love others, but you do not lose yourself in them. You share your presence, but you no longer bargain your worth. You walk into relationships not to fill a void, but to overflow your fullness. And most importantly, you discover that solitude is not absence. It is home. Kierkegaard showed you that despair is a call to truth. Schopenhauer revealed that solitude is not weakness, but inner strength. And your own journey teaches you that beneath all the noise you were never broken, you were simply waiting to return. You can continue losing yourself in the endless noise, or you can choose to become whole in the quiet. And when you choose wholeness, you step into a life where peace is no longer conditional, where presence is no longer dependent, where your own soul becomes your safest place. This is the silent revolution, the moment you stop running and finally come home.